Hey secret seekers, welcome to the quest for secrets. I'm thrilled you're here as we dive into hidden mysteries, untold stories, and the secrets that shape our world. Where are you tuning in from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below and let's connect across the globe. Chapter 1, Into the Monsoon. Jessica Fletcher stepped off the battered riverboat onto the muddy quay just as dusk settled like a shawl across the jungle. A low, rolling thunder heralded the approaching monsoon, and the air was thick with humidity and the scent of wet earth. Lantern light danced over the wooden planks, throwing wavering shadows that mingled with the swaying ferns and lianas creeping down from the looming canopy. Somewhere in the gloom, a troop of macaques chattered among themselves, their calls echoing through the dim undergrowth. Jessica drew in a slow breath, adjusted her worn tweed coat against the clinging dampness, and surveyed her new domain, a camp of canvas tents pitched haphazardly beside the riverbank, long tables cluttered with botanical journals, and a scattering of crates stamped, Fairfax Expedition. Inspector Harjit Singh, his uniform splattered with mud, stepped forward to greet her. His dark eyes were shadowed by fatigue, but they gleamed with a resolute intelligence. He doffed his brimmed hat in deference and extended a gloved hand. "Miss Fletcher," he said, voice low but steady. "Thank you for coming so promptly. I trust your journey was not too unpleasant." Jessica smiled wryly. "One cannot complain when the destination is so intriguing," she replied. As she shook his hand, she noticed the faint scar at his jawline and the way his shoulders tensed whenever the wind stirred the lantern flames. Clearly, this was a man who had seen more than one crisis in his time. He led her toward the heart of the camp, where two tents had been lashed together to form an impromptu command center. A flickering lamp illuminated a hastily drawn map of the surrounding jungle, and beneath it lay the open notebook of Sir Edmund Fairfax. Jessica crouched, examining the neat, looping script that had been interrupted mid-sentence. "He was documenting local orchid species here," she murmured, tracing the words with a gloved finger. "And he never lived to finish." Inspector Singh nodded grimly. "We found him just beyond the clearing at first light. His body was discovered by our guides, pressed against the roots of those ancient fig trees." He pointed toward the dark mass of foliage upstream. "We've cordoned off the area, but the rain is relentless, and evidence is eroding by the hour." Jessica rose and pivoted to take in the rest of the camp. Makeshift benches bore muddy footprints, glass vials, some shattered, gleamed like latent clues, and at one end, a small group of expatriate botanists huddled beneath an awning, their faces drawn with sorrow and fear. A lanky young man scrawled feverish notes, while an older woman dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief patterned with tropical blooms. Beyond them, a line of local guides in colorful sarongs waited silently, their expressions inscrutable beneath broad-brimmed hats. The entire company seemed suspended in a state of tense expectation, as though the jungle itself held its breath, waiting to see what Jessica Fletcher would uncover. Singh produced a battered leather folder and handed it to her. Inside were photographs of the ornate dagger that had ended Sir Edmund's life, a blade of unusual design, its hilt inlaid with ivory-white pollen grains that glinted in the harsh torchlight. Jessica studied them with keen interest. "This dagger is not merely ornamental," she observed. "Its craftsmanship suggests a collector's piece, perhaps acquired at great expense." She tapped the photograph. "And there's pollen here that doesn't belong to any common species." Inspector Singh glanced at her, a flicker of hope in his weary eyes. "We believe the pollen may lead to the murderer." "If only the monsoon would behave itself," he sighed. They walked together toward the riverbank, where the last sliver of daylight clung to the horizon. The water was swollen and churning, reeds bending under the assault of wind-driven rain that had already begun to fall in fat, warm droplets. Jessica paused, watching as a branch broke free from an overhanging tree and disappeared into the current. "The jungle is a master of concealment," she said softly. "What it takes, it often swallows whole." Inspector Singh offered her a sodden umbrella, but she shook her head. "No, thank you. I prefer to feel the world as it is, unfiltered." That night, as the camp settled into uneasy rest and the monsoon drumbeat grew louder, Jessica retreated to her tent with a single candle flickering beside her. She spread Sir Edmund's notebook across her lap and began to transcribe his final entries by the dim light. Outside, the storm rattled canvas walls and sent rivulets coursing through the underbrush. Yet within that intimate cocoon, Jessica felt the familiar thrill of pursuit awakening. This was more than a murder investigation, it was a battle against time and the elements, a race to reclaim truth before the relentless rain washed it all away. By the time the candle guttered and died, Jessica Fletcher had resolved two things: she would not rest until the murderer was unmasked, and she would navigate these treacherous green halls with every ounce of her famed ingenuity. Tomorrow, she would step into the clearing at first light, armed with nothing more than her wits, and perhaps, the key to unraveling the secrets that lay hidden beneath the monsoon veil. Chapter 2, The Fallen Botanist. Dawn broke through ragged clouds in silvery shafts, cutting pale lines across the dewy foliage. Jessica Fletcher left the cramped safety of her tent, her leather boots sinking slightly into the soggy earth. The monsoon had paused overnight, but the air still felt charged with grief and something darker. She pulled her waterproof coat tighter and headed toward the clearing that Inspector Singh had cordoned off. A thin ribbon of yellow tape wavered between two ancient fig trees, their buttressed roots like bony fingers clutching the soil. Beyond it lay Sir Edmund Fairfax, at rest upon the damp ground he so loved to explore. Jessica paused at the edge of the tape and closed her eyes, drawing a deep breath of humid air. When she opened them again, she took in every detail: the way the orchid-laced undergrowth had been disturbed, the scattered fragments of parchment, the dark stain spreading slowly across Fairfax's white cotton shirt. Inspector Singh stood a few paces away, his face drawn. "He died here," he said quietly. "Around first light." The guides heard the commotion but only reached him when it was too late. Jessica knelt beside the body, careful not to step on anything that might serve as evidence. Sir Edmund lay face up, his eyes closed in an eternal last thought. An ornate dagger protruded from his chest at a precise angle, no ragged twitch of violence, but a clean, deliberate thrust. The hilt was carved to resemble an orchid bloom, petals curling around a handle of polished ebony. On the pommel, flecks of pale, ivory-white pollen clung in minute clusters. She lifted her penlight and examined the blade, noting the absence of blood on the guard and handle. Whoever had wielded it had taken care to avoid leaving a trace. "This was never meant to be found," she murmured. Inspector Singh bent over her shoulder. "We've catalogued the pollen. Dr. Menon suggests it's from a hybrid orchid, one that grows only in the canopy, several hundred feet up." Jessica's brow arched. "Then our murderer either climbed trees or employed someone who did." She stood and scanned the perimeter. The clearing itself measured scarcely 20 paces across, ringed by brambles and ferns so thick that a grown man could vanish in an instant. The guides had found torn scraps of Sir Edmund's journal fluttering against a low branch, ink blurred by rain. Jessica gathered the pages and tucked them into a waterproof sleeve. She rose and walked the outline of the crime scene, her keen eyes picking out impressions in the soft earth. Near the dagger's handle lay a single footprint, size 8, men's, pressed deep where the mud had pooled. It led straight toward the river's edge, then cascaded off into an uncharted path. A second set of prints, smaller and narrower, intersected the first before veering back toward the camp. Whoever had fled knew the jungle's secret ways. Jessica crouched beside the downed remains of a small campfire. Coal still glowed faintly under ash, and half-burnt photographs lay among the embers. Sir Edmund in his study back home, surrounded by books, Sir Edmund kneeling beside an ivory statue, and a third image, torn cleanly in half, depicting him with a woman whose face was now lost to the flames. She pocketed the singed corner, noting its serrated edge. Torn deliberately, she mused. Not an accident of fire. Inspector Singh joined her, producing the morning's only fresh evidence, a photograph of Sir Edmund clutching a weathered map, its edges smeared with mud. He was tracing the route to something, an ivory cache, or so the villagers whispered, Singh explained. Jessica fingered the map's corner. He wrote in his journal that this map led to a secret grove, consecrated long ago by the local tribes. Singh sighed. And for that, some felt he was a traitor. Jessica turned her gaze back to Fairfax's still form. She lifted his hand and gently closed his fingers around a single page of his own journal, one he had grasped in death. On it, the final line read, "Beware the betrayer in plain sight." Ink smudged, the words were still legible. He knew his killer, she said softly. He expected betrayal. She rose, the brittle page tucked into her coat pocket, and surveyed the camp beyond the tape. Nearly every member of the expedition had ventured into this clearing over the past 24 hours. The widow, Lady Imogen Fairfax, had arrived late last night, her composure immaculate despite the tragedy. Dr. Rajiv Menon, pale and gaunt from lack of sleep, hovered at the camp's edge, muttering about lost research. Sister Cecilia, tending to the few injured by missteps in the undergrowth, watched the scene with cool detachment. And Inspector Singh himself, torn between his duty to the law and loyalty to his people, bore the weight of unanswered questions. Jessica retrieved her notebook and began to sketch the scene, labeling key positions, the dagger's angle, the footprint path, the fire pit and its scattered photographs. As she worked, each detail wove together into a tapestry of motive and opportunity. Someone had used Sir Edmund's passion for orchids against him, using pollen to mislead, the half-burned photo to silence a witness, the ornate dagger as both gift and weapon. But why? And by whose hand? A ripple of thunder rolled overhead. Jessica closed her notebook. Singh, she said, raising her voice above the jungle's quiet song, we need to interview everyone who entered this clearing since noon yesterday. And we must secure additional samples of that hybrid orchid pollen, fresh, untainted. Inspector Singh nodded briskly. I'll organize it at once. And I'll have the guides clear a safe path for us into the canopy. Jessica glanced back at the lifeless form of Sir Edmund Fairfax, his stained notebook lying open beside him. Time is our enemy, she murmured. Every raindrop threatens to wash away the evidence, and with it, the truth. She took a final, lingering look at the clearing's silent tableau, then turned resolutely toward the camp. The fallen botanist awaited justice, and Jessica Fletcher had every intention of delivering it. Chapter 3, Portraits of Suspicion. Late morning light filtered through the tattered canvas of the expedition's marquee, casting mottled patterns on the dusty ground. Jessica Fletcher arrived to find a semicircle of folding chairs occupied by the four principal players in Sir Edmund Fairfax's ill-fated venture, each nursing a private tension as palpable as the humidity in the air. A low murmur of conversation rose and fell like an unsettled tide, punctuated by the distant growl of thunder threatening another downpour. Jessica took a deep breath and settled into an empty chair, her keen eyes already at work, cataloguing every gesture, every flicker of expression. At her left sat Lady Imogen Fairfax, draped in elegant morning black that seemed incongruous in the jungle heat. Her posture was impeccable, spine straight, shoulders squared, and her gloved hands folded coolly in her lap. Despite the gravity of her loss, her features retained a sculpted composure, as though grief were a costume she had donned with care. Yet Jessica noted the minute tremor of her right hand when she brushed a curl of hair back from her temple, and the way her pale blue eyes occasionally darted toward the tent where Sir Edmund's journals were being examined. Was that sorrow, or calculation? Next, Dr. Rajiv Menon fidgeted at the edge of his seat, his crisp white shirt smudged with earth and sweat. A thin line of ash from the morning's fire pit still clung to his sleeve. He frequently paused mid-sentence to consult a battered notebook, as if afraid that words might betray him if spoken without reservation. He glanced at Lady Imogen, then at Jessica, and back to his notes, as though seeking reassurance in their familiar scrawl. Jessica observed the tension in his jaw, the restless tap of his foot against the wooden planks. Here was a man wrestling with more than just professional disappointment. She could almost smell the fear in his tightly clenched fists. On Jessica's right stood Inspector Harjit Singh, not in a chair but leaning against a support pole, arms folded. His uniform was crisp despite the grime of the camp, and his badges glinted dully in the filtered light. Singh's dark eyes were steady, almost imperturbable, yet Jessica discerned a hint of internal conflict in his stance, the soldier's readiness, the guardian's protectiveness, and the magistrate's impartiality all warring within him. He surveyed his companions with respect and wariness, as though suspecting each might be capable of unthinkable acts, even while assuming the mantle of protector for all. At the far end of the semicircle, Sister Cecilia sat apart, her hands clasped in her lap beneath the folds of a plain habit. Her face was serene, almost too serene. A faint sheen of sweat on her forehead suggested she was more affected by the heat than she let on, but she met Jessica's gaze with calm assurance. Her lips curved in a gentle, knowing smile, as if she carried unseen burdens of compassion and conviction. Yet Jessica sensed that behind those tranquil eyes lay a steely resolve, and perhaps secrets she deemed too sacred to confess. Jessica rose, her tone polite but firm. Thank you all for gathering on such short notice. I understand this is a difficult time, but it's imperative we proceed methodically. I'd like to ask each of you to recount your activities between noon yesterday and first light this morning, beginning with Lady Imogen. She inclined her head. Lady Imogen swallowed, smoothing her skirts. Of course. After luncheon, Sir Edmund and I rode upriver to examine a particularly rare orchid he'd discovered. I remained at the pavilion while he climbed into the canopy to obtain specimens. I admit I worried about him, you know how high he insisted on venturing, but I did not walk with him into the clearing where he was ultimately found. I returned to camp at dusk, reading here in my tent until the guides came to fetch me, sobbing, just before midnight. Jessica nodded, jotting brief notes. Did you notice anyone following you? Any unusual sounds on your return? Lady Imogen's lips quivered. Only the usual chorus of insects and birds. And the wind through the leaves. Dr. Menon adjusted his spectacles, voice quavering slightly. I spent the afternoon assisting the guides with cataloguing the canopy specimens. We set up rope pulleys near the clearing and hoisted several pressed samples to camp. I returned before sunset to consult Fairfax's notes on local pollen varieties. I then prepared slides until late, well past midnight, I'm ashamed to admit, when I finally retired to my tent. And did you encounter anyone en route? Perhaps someone who startled you? Jessica pressed. Dr. Menon blinked. Only Sister Cecilia, coming back from her rounds. She looked preoccupied. Sister Cecilia inclined her head. I was checking on the sick guides in their quarters. Her voice was soft, but Jessica detected an undercurrent of firmness. I passed no one else. Inspector Singh straightened at last. I patrolled the perimeter from 9 until midnight. There were no intruders beyond our camp boundaries, but I did notice fresh footprints leading from the riverbank into the undergrowth. He paused, eyes narrowing slightly. I reported it immediately, but by the time we examined them at dawn, the rain had already begun to wash them away. Jessica tapped her pen against her notebook. Thank you. One final question. Is there anyone here who may have felt slighted by Sir Edmund? Professional rivalry, personal disappointment, anything you believe might have bred resentment. Lady Imogen's expression faltered for a fraction of a second before she recovered. He was my husband, but I admit we argued about his obsession with this expedition. I feared for his safety. I would never harm him. Dr. Menon's hand shook as he closed his notebook. I depended on his funding for my research. When he withheld support, briefly, I was furious. But it passed. I respected him too much to consider violence. Sister Cecilia's gaze met Jessica's. I admired Sir Edmund's devotion, but I questioned his disregard for tribal sanctity. I confronted him in the pavilion, urging caution. He listened, then laughed at my concerns. I left feeling unsettled, yes, but still hopeful. Inspector Singh's uniform creaked as he shifted weight. I served under him during the survey last year. He valued order and scholarship above all. I cannot imagine he made enemies in the force, but then, this is no ordinary environment. Jessica sat back, letting the charged silence settle around them. For individuals, for plausible motives, and enough friction to spark tragedy. She closed her notebook with decisive calm. Thank you all. I know these questions are trying, but your candor is invaluable. I'll be interviewing you again once we've examined the pollen samples and the map fragments. Until then, please remain within the camp boundaries. As she stepped away, the air seemed to hum with suppressed revelations. Each suspect retreated into their own thoughts, their faces masks behind which a murderer might very well be hiding. Jessica Fletcher watched them with steady purpose. Portraits of suspicion, indeed, and it was her task to discern the brushstroke that did not belong. Chapter 4, Pollen, Photos, and Promises. The morning after her formal interviews, Jessica Fletcher rose before dawn, determined to pursue the delicate trail of clues hidden in Sir Edmund's clearing. The monsoon had relented overnight, but pale rivulets still ran through the undergrowth, carrying mud in rivulets that threatened to wash away every trace. Jessica pinned the ivory-white pollen sample to a corkboard in the command tent and studied it beneath her magnifying glass. Each grain was crystalline, not the powdery dust of common blooms, but the clustered spores of a rare hybrid orchid known among only a handful of botanists, Papiliocandiflora, the ghost orchid of the heights. By first light, she and Dr. Rajiv Menon made their way back to the clearing. Menon carried a woven basket, while Jessica held a leather-bound field guide. The pungent scent of decaying leaves mingled with the sweet tang of orchids overhead. Using a system of rope ladders and wooden platforms, they ascended into the upper canopy until they reached a tangle of branches grey with lichen. There, perched like a phantom, grew the elusive Papiliocandiflora, its petals ivory as bone and as fragile as prayer. Menon carefully harvested a few blossoms, sealing them in waxed paper. Only here, he murmured in reverent awe. Sir Edmund would have risked his life for these. Back on solid ground, Jessica examined the half-burned photograph recovered from the fire pit. The image was singed around the edges, but enough remained. Sir Edmund stood arm in arm with a woman in colonial-era dress, her face turned away, revealing only the curve of her cheek and a cascade of dark hair. The photograph's back bore a scrawl in Fairfax's steady hand, "To my dearest Evelyn, our secret fate." Evelyn, a name unmentioned in any journal entry, unrecorded in any expedition roster. Jessica pressed a fingertip against the burned edge, as if hoping for a fingerprint. Who was she wondered aloud. That afternoon, Jessica convened a second round of questions beneath the protective canopy of a bamboo shelter. She began with Lady Imogen Fairfax, whose composure had finally begun to crack. Drawing out the photograph and whispering Evelyn's name, Jessica watched the widow's smooth facade falter. Lady Imogen's voice wavered as she confessed, Evelyn was Sir Edmund's first wife, an Englishwoman who died in childbirth over 20 years ago. He never spoke of her to me. Tears pricked Imogen's eyes, but Jessica noted the careful way she tucked the confession away, sealing it behind stiff-lipped composure. Next, Jessica brought the photograph to Sister Cecilia. The missionary nurse's calm features darkened as she studied the burned image. I knew of Evelyn, Cecilia admitted. Sir Edmund was obsessed with the legends of colonial treasure hidden in these forests. He believed Evelyn's spirit guided him to forbidden places. Cecilia's admission carried a sharper edge, one of reverence mixed with dread. He sought answers in places the village elders warned against. It was only when Jessica presented the newly gathered orchid samples to Inspector Singh that the final piece clicked into place. Singh, clad now in rubber boots and rain-slicked jacket, examined the blossoms and nodded thoughtfully. This orchid grows only near a hidden grotto sacred to our tribe, he explained. It is said that the ghost of the forest queen appears among its petals. Singh's tone, respectful of tradition, crackled with unspoken tension. Foreigners were not welcome at the grotto, and Sir Edmund's intrusion had already angered the elders. That evening, Jessica stood once more at the edge of the sacred clearing, the soft drum of distant rain echoing like a warning. She spread her evidence before her, the pollen, the orchid blossoms, the scorched photograph, the torn journal page, and the cryptic map fragment pointing to a side path veiled by thick ferns. She traced the map's dotted line and realized the clandestine route, one used by local guides to bypass the main river trail. Someone had slipped in and out of that hidden thicket under cover of darkness, armed with a dagger carved in the shape of an orchid, just as Sir Edmund described in his journal. Jessica pictured his last moments, climbing the rope ladder to gather blossoms, perhaps startled by the sound of stealthy footsteps, the killer, waiting in the labyrinth of roots, one precise, silent thrust. The thought tightened her chest. The murderer understood Sir Edmund's passions, she murmured. Used them against him. Armed with this insight, Jessica requested one final item from the camp's stores, an extra rope ladder and a portable lamp. Before dawn the next day, she planned to follow the secret path herself, to the grotto where the ghost orchid grew in profusion, and where the murderer, driven by greed or vengeance, might have hidden the map and silenced its keeper forever. As night closed in and fireflies glimmered among the ferns, Jessica Fletcher allowed herself a moment of calm determination. The truth lay entwined in pollen and petals, in half-remembered names and ancient rites. Tomorrow, she would seek answers in the heart of the jungle's sacred shadows, and unmask the betrayer in plain sight. Chapter 5, Secrets Beneath the Canopy. Before first light broke the horizon, Jessica Fletcher and Inspector Singh set out for the hidden path sketched in Fairfax's journal. Their lamps pierced the pre-dawn gloom, revealing a narrow track concealed by dangling vines and steaming undergrowth. Each footfall kicked up the scent of moss and rot, a heady reminder that this jungle thrived on decay and renewal alike. Singh paused beneath a colossal kapok tree, its buttresses cleaved by centuries of wind, and tapped the map. This way, he whispered, and they slipped deeper into the fern-choked corridor. After a steep incline of damp roots and tangled creepers, the ground leveled out to reveal the remains of a long-abandoned pavilion. Stone pillars intertwined with banyan roots stood guard over a collapsed roof, while fragments of carved wood lay scattered among the leaf litter. The air here was unnaturally still, as if the forest held its breath in reverence for what once was. Sunlight, now cresting the canopy, slanted through broken rafters to illuminate a patchwork of faded murals, depictions of colonial men and tribal leaders in uneasy alliance, their faces half erased by time. Jessica ran a gloved hand over a crumbling banister, noting the craftsmanship, local hardwood, carved with stylized orchids and tribal motifs. At the pavilion's heart lay a stone dais, its surface scratched by innumerable footsteps. Beneath it, Singh discovered a loose slab. Together they prized it free to uncover a small cache, brittle notebooks wrapped in oilcloth. Jessica's breath caught. These were Dr. Menon's personal field notes, ones he had insisted were lost when his satchel tore on the trail. She gingerly withdrew the top volume and flipped to the final entries, eyebrows rising as she read. July 29th, midnight. Met Lady Imogen at the old pavilion. She pressed for the precise location of the ivory map. Promised her it lies beyond the northern clearing. Her eyes glinted with something like triumph. Jessica looked up at Singh. He lied about being alone in his tent. Singh's jaw tightened. And Imogen claimed ignorance of Sir Edmund's true quest. The implication was clear. Lady Fairfax had slipped away under the cover of darkness, guided by a traitor within the expedition. Jessica stowed the notebook in her coat and stepped around the dais, her lamp catching a chipped statuette partially buried in mulch, a likeness of an orchid sprouting from a coiled vine. Ivory fragments clung to its base, as though it had been hand-painted with Sir Edmund's own precious pollen. A rustle from above drew Jessica's gaze to a tangle of rope and canvas suspended from a broken beam. It was the remnants of a field hammock, stained with dried blood and bearing a torn edge matching the photograph's jagged burn. She hauled it down and found, folded within its fibers, a single sheet of Fairfax's handwriting, a plan for a clandestine rendezvous at this very spot. The note referenced Evelyn's Grove, the sacred hollow where the ghost orchids bloomed, the location Sir Edmund had kept secret even from his closest confidants. As Jessica studied the sheet, a quiet voice made her whirl. Sister Cecilia emerged from the underbrush, her habit smudged with dirt. I feared you might venture here, she said, voice steady despite the gloom. This place, it changed me. Jessica held up the field notes. These were hidden for a purpose. Why did you help conceal them? Cecilia's shoulders slumped. I found Sir Edmund bleeding here after his midnight climb. He whispered apologies and pressed this lodge upon me. He begged me to tend his wound, promising me silence if I loved him as he once loved Evelyn. Cecilia's confession trembled on the edge of relief and shame. I believed I healed him. I did not know he would not leave the canopy alive. Jessica put the notebook aside and regarded Cecilia with gentleness. Your mercy was exploited. The missionary bowed her head, tears glinting in the dawn light. I realize that now. Singh stepped forward, authority regained. We must take these notes back and question Lady Fairfax at once. Before they departed, Jessica cast one last look around the pavilion. The carved murals seemed to whisper of broken alliances, of bargains struck in the dark. She plucked a withered petal from the dais, brown with age, yet unmistakably belonging to the ghost orchid, and slipped it into her journal. Each fragment gathered here wove together a tapestry of deceit, Menon's betrayal, Imogen's guile, and Cecilia's compromised compassion. As they retraced their steps, the jungle seemed to lean in, branches brushing against their shoulders as though guiding them toward the truth. Back at camp, Jessica would confront Imogen with Menon's words. But here, beneath the verdant roof of vine and leaf, she had unveiled the first glimmer of justice, that no secret, however well buried under centuries of growth, could withstand the light of an unrelenting detective. And Jessica Fletcher, undeterred by the canopy's shadows, intended to bring every malefactor into the clear light of day. Chapter 6. Storm clouds gather. Dark clouds boiled at the horizon, the first deep rumbles of the monsoon rolling in like a funeral march. At the edge of the clearing, Jessica Fletcher paused beneath the shuddering canvas of the command tent to survey the assembled camp. Canopies sagged under sheets of rain, ropes groaned against battered poles, and every footstep drew up fresh puddles of mud. Around her, tension crackled as fiercely as the gathering storm. Supplies lay strewn in disarray, and the expedition's members moved with the furtive caution of hunted animals. In the center of the camp, Lady Imogen Fairfax stood beside a lean metal table, her morning gown streaked with grime. She held Sir Edmund's map spread out before her, tracing the ornate lines with trembling fingers. When Jessica approached, the widow's composure wavered, her eyes were puffy, her breathing shallow, as though she were poised on the brink of a confession, or an eruption. Beside her, Dr. Rajiv Menon hovered, clutching a sheaf of field notes he had retrieved from the pavilion. His face was ashen, and every so often he glanced toward Jessica with an expression of taut desperation. Inspector Harjit Singh stepped forward, brushing rain from his hat brim. "Miss Fletcher," he announced, voice low yet carrying across the sodden ground, "this storm will wash away the final traces within hours. We must act now." Jessica nodded. "Very well. I wish to confront Lady Fairfax with Dr. Menon's discovery. Then I will question Sister Cecilia on her involvement." She swung her gaze toward the missionary nurse, who sheltered beneath a separate canopy, her fingers twisting a damp handkerchief. Her calm veneer seemed brittle, as though it might crack under the pressure. Gathering her courage, Lady Imogen closed the distance between herself and Jessica. "What have you found?" she murmured, voice quivering. Dr. Menon stepped up, placing his notes on the map. "Last night, I found these entries," he said, throat tight. Jessica read aloud. "Met Lady Imogen at the old pavilion. The secret lies at Evelyn's Grove, beyond the northern ridge." The widow's face drained of color. She swayed, as though the words themselves carried the weight of stone. I only sought to protect Sir Edmund's legacy," she stammered. "He hid his greatest discovery from me, but I loved him." Jessica held her gaze steadily. "Then you knew the map led not to Ivory, but to a sacred grove worshipped by the tribes. You understood its true value." Imogen lowered her eyes. "I did. I feared the Ivory myth would destroy lives. I planned to secure the grove and donate it to science." Behind them, thunder cracked. Rain hissed against canvas, and the wind tugged at the edges of the tent. Singh called out, "We have no time for subtlety. Lady Imogen, did you lure Sir Edmund to his death?" The question hung in the roiling air. Imogen's lips parted, then pressed into a thin line. "No," she insisted, voice firmer. "I was there to talk, not kill. I left him with the dagger as a gift, an antique piece he admired. I never meant it for blood." Jessica studied the widow, her mind racing through the web of evidence, the orchid pollen on the hilt, the precise angle of the blade, the half-burned photograph that spoke of betrayal. "Then how do you explain the pollen on Sir Edmund's cuff and the dagger's handle?" "Your gift was coated with Papilio candiflora spores." Imogen's shoulders slumped. "I asked the guides to coat it as a symbol, an homage to his passion for orchids. I did not know it would implicate me." A sudden gust ripped open a side flap of the tent. Sister Cecilia appeared, water dripping from her habit, eyes blazing. "Stop this," she cried. "You twist every truth to suit your suspicions." Jessica turned to her. "You said you found Sir Edmund wounded here. Why did you conceal the dagger when you tended him?" Cecilia's face went hard. He begged me not to reveal who attacked him. He trusted me. She swallowed, voice raw. He said Evelyn's spirit guided him, but the dagger came from his own collection. Jessica felt the truth crystallize. The dagger was both instrument and misdirection, intended to tie the crime to a lover's remorse, a secret ritual. Yet the pollen smear, the torn photograph, and the hidden rendezvous all pointed elsewhere. Inspector Singh, she said, raising her voice above the storm's first heavy drops, we have a confession. Sir Edmund was ambushed by someone who knew his routines, his passions, and who wielded his own dagger to frame love and superstition. But this was no crime of the heart, it was one of expedience. Singh's eyes narrowed. Then who? He demanded, scanning the assembled faces. The widow's grief seemed genuine now. Menon's guilt was rooted in betrayal of truth, not life. Cecilia's mercy had been manipulated. Only one remained, a figure who had observed, schemed, and struck in plain sight. Jessica's gaze settled on Dr. Rajiv Menon. You, Dr. Menon, she said quietly. You resented Sir Edmund's dominance, feared his discoveries would eclipse your own. You used your expertise to engineer his downfall, deploying the hybrid pollen to mislead, staging the pavilion meeting to implicate Lady Imogen. Menon gasped, stepping back as if struck. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead. No, I only wanted recognition, he cried. I never meant for him to die. Singh produced a pair of handcuffs. You'll have time to reflect on your intentions. As the first sheets of rain battered the camp, Jessica watched Menon led away. In the midst of chaos and confession, justice had prevailed. The monsoon broke in earnest, as though the jungle itself had sighed in relief. Jessica Fletcher, steadfast in her pursuit of truth, closed her notebook and turned toward the torrential downpour, knowing that even in the darkest storm, clarity would always find a way to shine through. Chapter 7, The Hidden Grove. The rain had eased to a fine mist by dawn, clinging to every leaf like a soft veil. Jessica Fletcher, Inspector Singh, Lady Imogen Fairfax, and Sister Cecilia stood at the threshold of the secret track that led beyond the northern ridge. The events of the previous day, Menon's confession, the arrest, the wrenching sense of betrayal, hung heavy in the air. Yet Jessica knew their task was not yet complete. Sir Edmund's map, the key to Evelyn's grove, remained unclaimed. Jessica unfolded the sodden fragment of parchment one final time. By daylight the intricate ink trail was clearer, a scribbled arrow pointed toward a cluster of strangler figs, and a second note in Fairfax's spidery hand read, "Here lies the path." "The figs," she murmured, tracing their outline on the fragment. "We skirt the river here, then bear east until the roots form a natural archway." Inspector Singh consulted his own map. "This route avoids the main clearing," he agreed. "It will take us deep into uncharted understory, but the tribe's elders assured me the path is known to only a few." Lady Imogen swallowed, pressing her drenched handkerchief to her lips. "I want to see the grove," she said softly. "To honor his work." Sister Cecilia nodded, her expression composed. "And to make amends." They set off, stepping gingerly through the damp ferns. Each footfall stirred up the petrichor of leaf mold and the metallic tang of rainwater. The forest seemed to watch them. Vines quivered, orchids dripped droplets like tiny dewdrops, and overhead a lone hornbill wheeled across a slate-gray sky. Occasionally, Jessica paused to compare the landscape with Fairfax's sketch, her keen mind matching root patterns and moss patches against his notes. Nearly an hour into the trek, heavy roots did indeed coalesce into an archway 5 feet high, an arboreal portal through which sunlight fell in a narrow beam. Jessica held up a lamp to reveal carved notches at the base, tiny glyphs that matched symbols in Sir Edmund's journal. She smiled. "This is it." Beneath the arch, the air grew cooler and stiller. The mist coalesced into a shallow pool of water at their feet, reflecting the canopy in miniature. Beyond, ferns gave way to an open glade, nearly devoid of undergrowth. In its center stood a single, gnarled tree, its bark mottled with pale lichen. Around its trunk, ghost orchids clustered in wreaths, Papilio candiflora in full bloom, their ivory petals ghostly in the half-light. Lady Imogen gasped. "They are breathtaking." She knelt, reverently brushing a petal. Jessica knelt beside her and held out a small velvet pouch. Inside lay the recovered map, folded and preserved in oilskin. "Sir Edmund entrusted this to me, to ensure it reached those who would protect this place." Imogen's fingers trembled as she accepted it. "I swear to him, and to these orchids, that I will safeguard this grove." Sister Cecilia moved to the tree and placed her hand against the trunk. "The elders say the forest queen's spirit dwells here," she whispered. "Let her witness our vow." Jessica watched the interplay of devotion and sorrow on the women's faces, the solemn sense of legacy reclaimed after so many betrayals. But there was one final test. Jessica stepped into the center of the glade, scanning the ground for any sign of Dr. Menon's tampering. Under the thick moss she spotted a shallow indentation, freshly cleared soil, no older than a day. Kneeling, she raked away the top layer to reveal a battered tin box. Inside were ivory tusk fragments wrapped in coarse cloth, and beside them, a folded letter in Menon's handwriting, an admission of guilt not only for Fairfax's murder but for a scheme to sell the ivory on the black market. Jessica read the letter aloud. "I envied Sir Edmund's renown. When his discovery threatened to overshadow my work, I struck. The ivory was my insurance, funds for my research at any cost." The words stirred anger and pity in her chest. Inspector Singh closed the box gently. "He intended to profit from plunder," he said quietly. "To desecrate this sacred place." Lady Imogen folded Fairfax's map into a protective case and pressed it to her heart. "His legacy will not be tainted," she vowed. "This grove will be preserved for science, yes, but with the tribe's blessing and stewardship." Jessica nodded, stepping back to admire the glade one last time. The ghost orchids swayed in the faint breeze, untouched by greed or violence. Above them, the canopy began to clear, revealing a break in the thunderhead. A shaft of sunlight struck the dais where the orchids grew, illuminating them in pure white. "Come," Jessica said, straightening. "Let us return and ensure Dr. Menon's crimes are fully documented, and that the ivory is handed over to the authorities." Inspector Singh led the way back through the archway as Lady Imogen and Sister Cecilia followed, each lost in her own thoughts. As they emerged once more into the living labyrinth of the jungle, Jessica paused to look over her shoulder at Evelyn's grove, now bathed in the gentle light of a clearing storm. Here, beneath the green veil, she had recovered more than a map. She had restored justice and protection to a place long threatened by exploitation. Tomorrow, the world beyond the river would learn of Sir Edmund Fairfax's final triumph, not of ivory, but of remembrance. And as Jessica Fletcher picked her way down the secret path, her heart felt both heavy with grief and lightened by hope, for the truth, once uncovered, could never again be buried in silence. Chapter 8, Justice in the Monsoon. The camp lay quiet beneath a pall of early morning mist, the monsoon's final breaths lingering in the air. Tents sagged under last night's downpour, and rain-slicked leaves glittered in the pale dawn light. Jessica Fletcher and Inspector Singh stood by the riverbank as local magistrates arrived in a rickety flatboat, their faces grave with purpose. Dr. Rajiv Menon, in handcuffs and soggy shirt, was escorted from his waterproof tent to answer for murder and the illicit trafficking of ivory. Each step he took sank into the mud, leaving a trail of footprints destined to become evidence in the courtroom. Lady Imogen Fairfax waited on the bank, clutching her late husband's map in a leather satchel. Though her heart still ached, her eyes held steady resolve. Beside her, Sister Cecilia offered silent comfort, her habit spotless save for a few specks of jungle humus. When the magistrates approached, Jessica stepped forward to deliver the preserved ivory fragments and the tin box of incriminating letters. "These belong to the Crown and to the tribe," she declared. "May they be used to secure justice and to protect this grove from further desecration." The magistrates nodded, their expressions acknowledging the weight of responsibility they now carried. Under a canvas canopy, the tribe's elders assembled to witness the formal handover. Their weathered faces remained inscrutable, but when Inspector Singh presented them with the orchid-laden dagger, now void of bloodstains and sealed in a glass case, their eldest leader inclined his head in solemn acceptance. He tore a strip of cloth from his sash and tied it to the handle, binding symbolically the forest spirit to the law. Lady Imogen stepped forward, placing Fairfax's map alongside the dagger. "We pledge," she intoned, "to guard the grove with honor and to ensure its only legacy is remembrance and reverence." As the legal protocols concluded, Jessica retreated to the pavilion where so many secrets had been unearthed. The mossy dais still bore the ghosts of footprints and petals, but the air felt cleansed of treachery. She catalogued the field notes, photographs, and letters in meticulous order, knowing each document would find its place in the annals of colonial archives and in local records. Sister Cecilia assisted, her movements deliberate and respectful, as though every item was a fragment of Sir Edmund's soul. Together, they arranged the materials under a protective torp, safe now from rain and from prying hands. The morning slipped into midday with no ceremony beyond the essential. Inspector Singh approached Jessica, offering a flask of strong tea brewed with wild lemongrass. "You've done a remarkable thing here," he said quietly. "You've honored the botanist's spirit, upheld the law, and preserved our traditions." Jessica accepted the tea, inhaling its bittersweet aroma. "It was a team effort," she replied. "Without your understanding of local customs, I could not have navigated the grove without offense. And without the elders' guidance, the truth might have been lost beneath layers of superstition and fear." Lady Imogen joined them, her mourning veil damp but her posture dignified. "My husband would be proud," she murmured. "He sought knowledge above all else. Today, his passion ensures life for these orchids, not exploitation." She placed a single ghost orchid bloom into Jessica's hand. The petals trembled, as though still clinging to the hush of legend. "For you," Imogen said, "to remember the forest's gift, and its generosity." Sister Cecilia touched the orchid gently, eyes downcast. "And for me," she added, "to atone for my part in his suffering." Her voice was soft but carried an unbreakable strength. Jessica offered them both a reassuring smile. "Every healing begins with honesty," she said. "You have all chosen that path." As the sun finally breached the cloud cover, beams of light danced upon the river's surface. The sound of distant cicadas rose in a jubilant chorus, as though nature itself celebrated the ending of violence. Jessica closed her notebook, its leather cover dotted with raindrops and the faint imprint of her thumb. She surveyed the camp one last time, the empty tents, the scattered journals, the boat waiting to carry them home. Moments later, Lady Imogen and Sister Cecilia boarded the flatboat with the magistrates, the orchids and dagger carefully stowed below deck. Inspector Singh shook Jessica's hand, his grip firm. "Safe travels, Miss Fletcher. Should you ever return to these forests, know you will be welcomed as a friend and protector." Jessica inclined her head. "I shall," she promised. As the boat drifted away, Jessica remained on the muddy bank, the jungle's canopy parting in sunlight overhead. The monsoon's fury had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and ready for renewal. She closed her eyes and listened, the distant roar of the river, the rustle of ferns reclaiming space, the breath of something ancient and unspoken. In that moment, she understood that justice was not merely a verdict, but a living balance between mankind and nature. Turning at last, Jessica Fletcher gathered her satchel and strode up the river trail. Behind her, the clearing where Sir Edmund Fairfax fell began to blur into emerald shadows. Ahead, the path forked toward the unknown, always another mystery waiting to be uncovered, another truth yearning for discovery. With a final glance over her shoulder, she stepped into the forest's embrace, certain that wherever darkness lingered, her light would follow.